Well, hi folks. You've seen me before. I'm James Logan, and I'm going to moderate a panel today on 52 versus Marvel Now. We're going to talk about current comics, and we're going to talk about kind of the marketing strategies of what each is doing, and we're going to talk story a little bit too, that kind of stuff. But what's going on with the creators and what's going on with the companies and how they're doing business and how they're putting out their books and the changes, the vast changes that have been made to the big two in the industry in the last couple of years. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves real quick? Robin?
I'm Robin Bailey. I write fantasy and science fiction primarily, but lately I've been doing work for Moonstone comic books.
Are you still doing Moonstone stuff? Or Moonstone stuff?
I actually just turned down 2 contracts for them that I don't have time to do.
Really?
But yes,
okay.
I will continue to do work for them.
Because I knew you were doing some Spider a couple years ago, but I didn't know if you were still doing that.
Yeah, they have offered me some more Spider work and some work on something that, for lack of anything else, I call the Extraordinary League of Pollsters. You know, they're doing a sort of Justice League with people like Captain Midnight and Spy Smasher and a group of those put together, sort of like following the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen's pattern.
That's interesting.
Taking these old pulp characters.
Dynamite's doing something similar with the Shadow and a couple other characters like that, putting them all on a team.
I like what they've been doing with the Shadow.
Yeah. My partner Vince is a huge Shadow fan. He says it's fantastic.
My name is Michael Lee, and I'm a longtime comic book reader. I'm out of Minneapolis. That's about it. Quick and to the point.
But he knows his stuff because we talked about it yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, at least you knew your movies yesterday.
Oh no, I've been reading.
Comics.
Yeah, I've been reading comics for a long time. Probably, for my entire reading life, comics has been a part of it.
Now, Robin, I know you're a big Superman guy.
Big Superman. I'm off to Superman Days 2 weeks from now.
Superman Days.
Superman Days? You don't know Superman Days?
Are you talking about
Metropolis?
Oh, Metropolis. Yeah, that's not what they call it. But, okay. Yeah, the Superman Celebration. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm actually skipping it this year just because I have so much going on. I usually go, but I'm not going this year.
Oh, it's with the big movie coming out and everything.
I bet it's going to be a really good show. Yeah, I wish I was going. But anyway, so Robin, what are you reading right now? I mean, you don't have to go down your whole pull list, but I mean, like, are you reading much Marvel, or is it mostly exclusively DC?
I'm not reading nearly as much Marvel as I used to read.
Really?
Oh, those are going to be good because I'm on the opposite side.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit on the opposite. This is interesting. Go ahead.
And I sort of restrict my comics these days. I follow Action and Superman pretty much, and I keep an eye on. I spot read many of the other titles. The Green Lantern titles started out strong, but have kind of gone to hell. But I was a big fan of Green Lantern also. I keep up with the X-Men, more or less, and all their various gatherings.
And you should, because it's in a great place right now.
And have just pretty much, that's pretty much it. The X-Men, occasionally the Avengers, Superman, Action, the Green Lantern comics. I spot read Aquaman, spot read Hawkman occasionally. Just hop around like that.
I think Savage Hawkman's getting canceled, isn't it?
I believe it has been.
I think it has been, yeah. Michael, what are you reading?
I have a lot of stuff on the Marvel side. X-Men, Avengers titles, Fantastic Four, NFF are probably the big ones. Captain Marvel. That's the core on the Marvel side. Occasionally I'll pick up various titles on the DC side. Less relevant to this panel, less New 52. That did actually roll me off a lot of titles, and I didn't re-engage.
And how much were you reading before?
I was actually reading a fair amount beforehand. And I do go on ebbs, kind of depending on where the creative teams are and where the creative strengths are. So I was reading the Green Lantern with Jeff Johns in the early piece, but then somewhere about with the War of the Black Lantern and stuff, it just lost me at that point. And
it really became convoluted.
Yeah, and I was like, and then actually a lot of the New 52 was because I think they took the creators that caused me to stop reading Marvel in the 90s. So, and so I was not reading as much DC at that point.
Well, it's kind of interesting because it sounds like you read more toward creators.
Yeah, I think
and it sounds like you read more toward characters.
I read
or
more
do
toy
you
characters,
follow some
and I
creative?
spot read comics these days. If
Yeah.
there's a really good story over in
Yeah, that's fair to me. I mean,
Oh, yeah, sure.
I mean, there's a combination of characters and characters and creators. I mean, for me, anytime a new creator hits Fantastic Four or X-Men, I'm likely to check it out. But if they lose me, then I'll skip. I don't feel alive.
Fantastic Four is a good example of how I read. During the death of the Torch and all that transition into the Future Foundation, I found all that kind of fascinating. But
yeah, I did too.
once the Torch was back and they sort of got rid of
that's when I
that,
dropped.
then I dropped it again.
As soon as they brought in the 2 books, that's when I quit. I mean,
Yeah.
when they brought back Fantastic Four and they had it running with FF, that's when they lost me on it too. Okay, so how do you guys? And of course, I mean, I read a ton of stuff because I collect, but I am enjoying more Marvel right now than I am DC, and I keep trying to make myself read more DC. The problem is it's so rocky because of how many times or how often the creative teams keep changing, just constantly. And a lot of that at DC right now, it seems to be that DC editorial keeps turning a lot of writers and artists away. I mean, they're just like not happy with what editorial's giving them to do. And I mean, we've been hearing this ever since 52 started. You were talking about Action. They solicited Andy Diggle's Action. They put out the first issue with Diggle, and he had already quit. Like that's how they're turning people off right now, and it's just really sad. Some of the stories we've been hearing. I mean, like there's a lot of stuff like going on. You know, there's what happened with Gail Simone, where they fired her and then they hired her back on right away, and all of that kind of stuff. There's all the crazy Rob Liefeld stuff that's gone on. You know, all those sorts of things, and it affects the stories, and it makes it difficult to get really invested.
No, I think that's true. I think without having a lot of, except for what you see on the chatter, and Gail Simone's this great example where one day she's been fired, and then the internet was in uproar, and then all of a sudden she was the next back in the same place, and that doesn't even help anything in that sense. And that's actually one of the titles that I do read fairly off and on.
I've liked what I've read of it.
Yeah, on the DC side.
There's definitely great stuff going on at DC, but what I'm finding is I usually am enjoying the things that work kind of by themselves in a box. The 52 continuity has been kind of convoluted, I think.
Well, it's a very, very, very long history, dating from the first Superman, everything that's the first Action. They've had to revamp that for new generations each time, and if you're a long-time comic reader, you've seen all those revamps, and they do get kind of convoluted. What I liked about DC 52, I tried to do this panel last year, I accidentally forgot to schedule it.
Yeah.
Things were only underway for about 5-6 months at that time, and everything was much more fresh in my mind. But I really liked the revamp of Superman, and I liked the revamp of Supergirl.
Oh yeah,
which
that's my favorite. In fact, you and I have talked about this. That's one of my favorite books of the 52.
And
at least at the beginning it was.
I liked bringing back Barbara Gordon as Batgirl.
We'll have to agree to disagree on that, but
unfortunately, it's lost everything that it had in the first 4 or 5 issues, I thought. But the whole Batman, of all the revamping that they did of the various characters, the first Aquaman I thought was just brilliant.
Oh yeah, it was.
That scene when he's sitting in a restaurant trying to have a meal, and he orders fish, and everybody is
what? How you're Aquaman? How do you
talk
fish?
to fish?
Well, fish have very little brains. They can't think. It's okay.
And that was brilliant. And I like the revamp of a lot of characters, but it seems like as they've moved further into the 52 period, they're sliding back into the old characterizations a bit.
The difficulty I have with it is I feel like a lot of what's really good in 52 would have still been there regardless of the relaunch. It wasn't a full-blown reboot, and I feel like that was the mistake they made. They rushed it out, and they held back, and they also put it out too quick. I mean, like, clearly they didn't have anything like enough lead-up time. It really seemed like something they came up with maybe months.
Well, I mean,
not very many months before they did it. Whereas Marvel now, clearly they were working toward this for a long time.
Well,
that's the difference.
I think part of it really was you saw DC. You know, it did have this appearance of desperation that DC saw that they were having sales, and the industry is changing in lots of different ways. I mean, I no longer read individual issues of comics from a comic store. If I'm buying individual issues, I'm buying them digitally. Where that, I think, that in particular, and that was part of the DC relaunch. Day and date, pretty much all titles are now day and date digital and print. But I think doing those pieces. But I think that was one of the things, that there was that commercial reality that interfered with the artistic one on the DC side, where I think Marvel in the same, which has some of the same, is in the same position, has the same, has some of the same, how the nature of publishing is changing very, very rapidly, not just in the comics industry, but across every format. But I think Marvel, backed by their fresh acquisition as well, gave them a little bit more confidence to just keep doing what we're doing, but change it up. I mean, still refresh it with the Marvel Now, but not in the same sense that the DC.
That's absolutely right. What Marvel did was what they have claimed that they're trying to do with every event they've done in the last 5, 6, 7 years, and they finally accomplished it. With AVX, they said the same thing that they always say, which is this will change the face of the Marvel Universe. They always say that, and about 6 or 7 days later, it's exactly the same as it was before, pretty much. Marvel Now, leading in with AVX, really did change things and made things really interesting. And the big change they've made is incorporating X-Men with the rest of the Marvel Universe in a way they've never done before.
Yes.
And it was a fantastic move. I think what DC was doing with New 52 was a patchwork fix.
Yeah.
I think it was, we need to bring in a bunch of new readers by doing a reboot, but we're also scared of losing the people we already have, which means we have to keep certain continuities the same. Do you guys realize just the sheer amount of DC 52 that's in a bubble that's exactly the same as it was before 52 started?
Yeah.
That has no...
Batman is, of all the titles that needed revamping, I mean seriously revamping, the Batman family.
Ooh, I don't know if I agree with that. Batman needed revamping. Really, you think his history was too convoluted?
It is too convoluted, and actually, given what they've done to the other characters,
I agree with you with maybe Damian Wayne and Jason Todd and things like that, but
the oldest hero in the DC universe right now.
Well, that's true, but I feel like all you had to do was slow down all that continuity. I'm not sure you had to change it. The thing is, but you're right, 52 made it silly because not only did all that happen, but within 5 years.
Yeah.
And he's got a 10-year-old son. It doesn't make any sense. And all of the other things that they did too. And it also sometimes feels like they pick and choose things where it's all supposed to be in the same continuity, but then, other things will go, but this bad guy's origin is a little different than it was. Those sorts of things. Whereas Green Lantern, entirely in a bubble. Like everything is exactly the way it was.
Right. Yeah.
And the same is true of Legion. It was in a bubble.
Well, that's always one of those things. Legion's easy to do that.
Yeah, sure.
Nature. But I think
interestingly, they just canceled that, and they started 52, I think, with like 2 or 3 Legion books. And
Legion
their main Legion book is done now. Yeah, I don't know. That's funny. Well, and what do you guys think of that? I like that they took a few risks with some of the titles at the beginning of 52, where it wasn't all just straight up superhero. Mm-hmm. But I think they made a mistake by making it all in the same universe, maybe, because a lot of that stuff just. People didn't buy it. People weren't interested. There were some bizarre titles, and people didn't buy them.
Well, I think having bizarre titles is great. I think.
No, I think it is too.
Yeah, I mean, and there were some that I was kind of interesting to see how, it was kind of said that the return of a lot of the characters that had been shuffled off to Vertigo, that were DC characters, integrated back in, but still keeping a little bit of that same flavor. I read. For a while, but fell off Animal Man. Not for any, just fell off it.
Yeah, sure.
and some of the some of those. But I thought that was interesting stuff. The way that they did, those were success. Those were at least the right sort of things to do. I thought interesting. And I actually liked what they did with Super. I thought if they actually had followed through with other titles the way they did Superman, that might have actually been more complete. But by patchworking it was actually less engaging as a whole.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
How do you mean patchworking?
Patchworking, where patchwork, where Green Lantern stays the same back, and because then you get caught up in the continuity. Then you actually get caught up in the continuity where you shouldn't be.
The worst thing for me about the Green Lantern reboot was what they were doing with Hal Jordan. Why the hell they decided to make him Ryan Reynolds, I don't know. The Green Lantern movie was polluted by this sort of silly making fun of sense of humor, I thought that weakened the movie. And then when we saw the Justice League issue, he's Ryan Reynolds. He's not Hal Jordan, the fearless space pilot.
I agree with you.
And they carried that over for a long time, and it was bad enough that they had 3 Green Lanterns. They should, in the reboot, they should have just wiped out the other 2 Green Lanterns. Instead, they gave us a 4th Green Lantern.
When I said that maybe it shouldn't have been all in the same continuity, I think what I mean is they wanted you to buy all of it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they made a real big push. You need to buy all these titles, but it's not a tight universe at all.
No.
It doesn't feel like you're in the same place. I mean, like, yeah, you have different tones for comic books, sure. And I'm not saying that just because you've got superheroes doesn't mean. Hey, folks. I'm not saying that just because you have superheroes doesn't mean you can't also have horror books and westerns and things that were in the same universe. I thought it was really cool we brought back All-Star Western.
Yeah.
And that we did like a western, like 1800s history of Arkham. I thought that was a really cool idea. I liked that we brought back DC Universe Presents, and we can do and I think that's gone now. I'm not sure.
I don't remember.
I don't remember. But I mean, but I like that we can do maybe 5-6 issue story arcs with different characters that don't have their own books.
Yeah, that aren't going to.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that both
I love anthology books.
Yeah.
We don't have nearly enough of them.
And there aren't enough, and there are so many great characters in both of those universes that deserve that have stories that can still be told with them. And I think that and I think one of the things in the difference between the two as well is both are willing to shake things up, but how they do them is very different. I mean, the Marvel universe of today is not by any stretch of the imagination the same Marvel universe it was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. But it can't be, because it's targeted to a different audience with different experiences, but they still manage to not get caught up in the way the DC universe has, where they feel, re-separate, new reboots, all this. I mean, it's an interesting distinction between the two, and I think Marvel now shows that as well. They've done a lot of re-things.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel has never had a full-on reboot and has kept its continuity more or less the same since it started in the 60s. But then you're saying Batman needs to be rebooted, and we're only talking 20 or 30 years of continuity there. You know what I mean? Like if Marvel can do it, why can't DC do it? At least with some of their characters. Now, I'm not saying that they manage it all the time. I think Spider-Man is in a bit of a mess. But
let me give you an example.
I would agree wholeheartedly.
Thanks. Yeah. I know some people love Superior. It doesn't work for me, but
I'm actually enjoying Superior.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I won't hold it against you.
It goes back to what I said earlier, though. That is, nobody's ever really dead in the comics.
No, I'm
hopeful something will come around down.
I have all the faith in the world that in 5 years Peter Parker will be Spider-Man again. That's not even the question for me.
I also think that Marvel started its reboot is the wrong word, but started Marvel new, 6 months, almost a year after DC had launched their reboot.
Yeah.
And I think There's an example here from the fantasy community. I wrote for a series called Thieves World, a multi-million selling series, really big for a while. George Martin came and said, I want to do wild cards, tell me all the problems you've had with Thieves World, and I will change my contracts and do it differently, but with the knowledge of what
That's a great point. Yeah, Marvel was able to see what
Marvel
DC
was able
did
to see
wrong.
what worked for DC and what did not work for DC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think the current popularity with the Marvel movies is helping the comic book side?
No, I don't. I really don't. We see most of the time that at least the big superhero movies don't tend to help comic book sales. If you look at the numbers, you know, your top comics usually sell, like I was saying yesterday, in like the 100,000 to 150,000 range. That's not changing. That's not growing. And so we're not seeing Marvel, because the thing is, we had huge Marvel movies at exactly the time 52 started, and I mean that was around First Avenger, Captain America, right? I mean that was around that time, and 52 was killing Marvel because it was new and it was big, and they were trying to market it to new readers, and they were trying to get people to go, hey, look, it's a reboot, and anybody can come in and read it, which was not wholly true, but that's how they sold it.
Yeah.
And it worked for them for several months, and so yeah, I don't think the movies are factoring in at all. What's really interesting is you really don't seem to see huge pushes with comic sales with movies and TV and stuff, with that stuff, but you do a little bit with more independent things.
Unbreakable. V got a big boost.
Did it get a big
when that
boost?
movie came out.
Yeah, well, but I'm thinking even things that are currently still running, what was the what is that? Why can't I think of the name of that? Walking Dead.
Oh.
Just like top 10 of the year, 5 or 6 were Walking Dead titles the year that show started.
I think
Scott Pilgrim had the same thing, which is really interesting.
I also think how the films influence comics. I think there's more to it than you think it is. Just my gut kind of feeling of it, because they do start to. But I think it's in a very different way. It's not necessarily okay. Big Iron Man film is out, so Iron Man sells more.
Yeah.
Right. I think it carries the whole genre.
Yeah,
Oh, no,
yeah.
it does. And we know
and
the comic industry is growing. I think it's helping digital.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Before it's helping print.
Yeah, well, but actually there is some helping, at least for us, at least, I went to the Source Comics and Games, which is a pretty strong comic and game in the Twin Cities area, on Free Comic Book Day. And Free Comic Book Day is like Black Thursday Black Friday for them, literally.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
literally, there that one day.
It's that way at Elite too.
Yeah, I mean that one day they make as much money in it by like noon that they do in the whole rest of the year put
But
together.
I'm telling you, a lot of the people that walk in there, that is the only day they walk in there.
Absolutely, but that's still but I mean it's the difference between certainly the regular week by week buyers, but I think you are seeing things where that influences not necessarily the new comic sales, but what trades people buy, what things of that nature.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But to your point, the fact that Marvel has a huge movie presence right now and DC doesn't, I don't think factors in one iota to why Marvel now is currently doing better than DC is. Just because 52 was in really good shape when it started.
Well, yeah.
And if they had
obviously
kept
you
that
gotta have
level-
good writing, you gotta have good storylines, things like that. I mean, same with movies. I mean, if you go to a movie and it's written poorly, it's crap. The word's going to get around. People in the comic book world, those of us that collect, those of us that read. Yeah, if there's good stories out there, I mean, that spreads. If people pick it up, they read
also
it.
those new readers that weren't into comics that started 52 because they went, oh, everything started at number
Yes,
1. Now
yes.
I can get in.
Jump
A
in.
lot of those people are falling off already because it's already become too complicated for them.
Right.
And I mean, it's something, and I think that is one of the places where
It's too complicated for me, and I've been reading comics all my life. I mean, I can't keep up with it. I'm like, what is what counts and what doesn't count?
Canon and what is not.
Can you tell me this? You read Superman. I've not read Superman all the way through 52. I picked and chosen with that. How do you say that in past tense?
But I have to
I gotta ask you this question
Kept this
though.
off by saying that I stopped reading Superman about 5 months ago.
Oh, you did? Okay, but from what you read, did Superman die ever? Did Doomsday kill him in this? I don't know if it happened.
I would assume not.
But it's referenced in a couple places,
know.
but then in other places it's totally contradicted. We don't know. Anyway, I just find that really irritating, and it makes me jump around and stuff. Anyway,
but then you get over to Batman. You got a 10-year-old son, and how many Robins have died? And
I know.
in this 5-year period, Robin
And we just
grow
killed
up and
another one?
become
And then and then Robin is like marked, even more clearly marked for death. Is why is anyone with why is Batman should be arrested for child endangerment for sure at that point.
One of the biggest problems I've got trying to read Batman right now, and there's some great Batman. I mean, I love Snyder's Batman. But the thing about Snyder's Batman is it feels like its own universe, man.
Yeah.
It's hard to when 52 stuff even begins to encroach on that, it takes me out a little bit because I feel like that's its own thing. But what's weird is I feel like we've got 4 different Batman continuities going on right now, and the big things like Damian's death, they try to make affect each book. Every version of Batman handled Damian's death in an entirely different way. These are not the same guy.
Yeah.
None of them. It's bizarre. I mean, I'm serious. Like in Batman and, which they're calling it that now because each issue he's with somebody else because Robin died, so he's not Batman Robin. It's Batman and. I want that title to be Batman ampersand because I think that would be hilarious. Anyway,
You're right. Yeah.
But Batman and they did this bizarre thing where Batman kidnaps Frankenstein from Frankenstein Agent of Shade and tries to make him create a Frankenstein monster to bring Robin back to life. Yeah, Batman does this. Yeah. Then you go over to Snyder's Batman, and Batman's telling Alfred, don't worry, I'm not losing it. This is not like the death of Jason Todd. Apparently, you're not the same Batman who kidnapped Frankenstein. You see what I'm saying? And this is supposed to be in the same universe. This is the problem. Whereas you go to Marvel now, and I cannot believe how well they're keeping all the X-Men stuff straight.
Yeah.
Holy crap! Now it helps that most of it's Bendis.
Yeah.
But good lord, the way they're able to keep all that together.
And then even
it's not confusing with like 1,000 characters. I know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Marvel isn't like it's like is Iron Man in space or not or some of that but even that they managed to
there is some of that still.
They throw that throwaways into that it's like there was an Avengers issue where he's like beaming himself in or something like that. And I think some of that's the inevitable of, it's actually kind of,
Marvel has its silliness.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole bit.
Oh, I'm not saying it's
I've always
perfect.
thought, what the fuck is it with Dazzler? She has this incredible superpower. And, in her own comic book, she was quite competent. And then she became sort of this joke. And they sort of brought her back for a bit. But now they've got her off traveling. If there's a problem I have with Marvel, it's all their multiverse. They're all their multiple versions of stuff. And now they've got her dimension hopping, and that comic is just silly and meaningless and a waste of trees.
I haven't read any, except I think she's going to be, she ended up in one of the, and more was probably a spoiler, and like, in
the
one
most
of the
recent issue of Uncanny.
Yeah, most recent version of Uncanny. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
The last page.
Panel. Yeah.
Boy, you and I could talk for hours. Just out of curiosity, how do you feel about what Bendis is doing with X-Men?
I'm actually really, really happy with it. I like the flip, and that's one of the reasons why I'm actually excited about as well, because they're doing the same sort of flip in Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
Where instead of going into the future, you're bringing these the original X-Men into the present, and now the original present is actually the dark timeline they need to avoid. In some
really
extent,
interesting.
And
I didn't think in a million years that would work.
Oh,
I picked up the first issue because I went, well, I gotta see how they messed this up, and then they didn't. And it's riveting, and I love how Bendis has made the original X-Men characters like they're different. We see 5 of one version, 5 of another version, and these are different characters.
Oh yeah,
it's so interesting. I shouldn't like it, but I do. It's that kind of thing. It shouldn't work, but it does.
I'm very happy, and I'm very happy and very intrigued with where the different pieces of it will go.
I like the scene with Angel in the last issue or two, where he's seeing what he has become in the future, and he sees Archangel basically, and he's not happy with that at all.
That was all really fascinating. And another thing I appreciated about it is this should not be a good jumping on point for X-Men, but it totally is. Bendis is using so much old continuity, but he's doing it in such a way where it's pretty easy to learn about old continuity while you're reading it. I didn't know much about a lot of that Archangel stuff because it's been. I mean, I'd only read bits and pieces of it. It's been so long, and I felt like I got caught up instead of confused.
Yeah, he's always been. I mean, this goes back to the Avengers run. I think he's always been really good about balancing both sides of things. Saying, okay, one of the whole reasons why we all love these universes is because they're these rich, this rich history.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we love about this stuff. But it's also important that it's constantly accessible because there's a new generation of 12-year-olds every year that should be reading comics, or whatever age. There are always new people reading comics.
And how do you do that without boring the rest of us?
Yeah. And I shouldn't be the target of an X-Men book. I don't need any more X-Men stories myself. But at the same time. Mixing that up and having it in both senses is really, really something I enjoy a great deal about what.
Well, particularly in the
Bendis is
X-Men.
doing.
I've been a big X-Men reader from the very first issues, and I still don't collect as comprehensively as I used to. But the X-Men is one of the titles that I've always followed, whether it was New X-Men, All New X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, Astonishing X-Men. Through all of those, I've kept an eye on the series, and what I've liked about them more than even any of the other Marvel titles is the way the characters in the X-Men have evolved. You really don't necessarily know where any character is on the good-evil scale anymore. Gambit is a hero one moment, then you find out he'd done this shady thing with Sinister, and there are repercussions to that. The story just doesn't end with repentance, and you don't reset the clock in the Marvel universe. The way you do in the X-Men universe, the way you do others. Is Magneto an evil character, or has he truly repented and become a good guy? Well, he seems to for a bit, but now he's running around with Dark Cyclops.
Who I never thought I'd be okay seeing get as dark as he did, but then that's fascinating, and
and that whole evolution of characters, I find Marvel handles that much better than DC does. DC is too quick to hit the reset button.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I've always thought part of that is partly just because of the original nature of those universes. Because Marvel was put together as a universe, and DC wasn't. I mean, before Marvel started, you had Timely Comics, and some of these characters existed. Stan Lee and some of his people invented a lot of what we have now. And when they started creating these characters with Spider-Man and with the X-Men and with Daredevil and Fantastic Four and these characters, they kept intending them to be in the same universe. Whereas pretty much every major character we know from DC existed before DC was what we know it as now, and then they had to figure out how to put them all in the same universe. I think that's also part of why they're having such a difficult time figuring out what to do with the movies.
Yeah,
that's why
because finding a tone.
Well, it's much more difficult
as a cohesive universe.
Yeah, it's much more difficult to launch from the way almost every Batman film has been, where Batman always exists in this independent vacuum where there is nothing else. Was not especially wasn't as challenging perhaps than to start to piece together the Marvel things where, okay, this is how Iron Man and the Hulk, they make sense to be in the same universe, Captain America, and here's how from Captain America Thor also makes because that was probably the biggest challenge, to have the alien, the alien god, space god type thing.
And it's a lot easier to gently get us there in Marvel than it is DC. I mean, that's why the idea, which I originally resisted, but it makes more sense the more I think about it. The idea that Warner's had to start a Justice League movie and then launch from there made a lot of sense in a way, because then you've got a tone with these characters already pre-existing, and you kind of know what that universe looks like. You almost have to start full tilt and then reel it back with some solo films. Maybe. It's sounding more and more like that's probably not what they're going to do, because I think that if they do finally do a universe, it'll launch from Man of Steel. But I wonder if maybe they shouldn't have gone that way the more I've thought about it. But anyway, I mean, that's neither here nor there. But
I just don't see the Justice League movie working. I just don't.
Just at all?
I know they want to get right in there because the Avengers worked so well, but they haven't really introduced Wonder Woman to a theater audience.
Right. Oh yeah, sure.
And particularly when the DC 52 Wonder Woman launched, the critics were just, oh, this is wonderful. I thought this is old. Here we are back to the whole Greek mythos again, and just fighting with the gods all the time.
A lot of people hate it now.
Boring when it's old. And how they're going to incorporate that in the movie, never having introduced her at all. There hasn't...
Right, especially since she's one of the key three.
She is one of the key three in the comic books. How that's going to translate over into film, I have real doubts.
Yeah, and I just thought of this, and I don't know why I've never thought of this before. How hard must Warner Brothers be kicking themselves that they rejected Joss Whedon's Wonder Woman?
Oh, I know.
Because Whedon just broke all the records last year with Avengers.
Yeah, I know.
How hard have they got to be kicking themselves? That's actually really funny. I mean, they lost this powerhouse that ended up making $200 million opening weekend, well over $1 billion worldwide. Yeah, wow. Well, hey, we've got like 20 minutes left. You guys want to ask any questions or add anything to the discussion?
Well, I think the tone thing you're talking about, like DC movies versus Marvel movies, the thing is, Marvel doesn't have a big, gritty, dark hero, whereas DC's biggest hero arguably is Batman, right? And Batman is like
these days,
total opposite of Superman, right? Superman is, way over the top, aliens, saving the world. Batman is gritty crime. And in Marvel, they have some heroes like that, but A, they're not super popular, and B, they're with other studios, like Daredevil and Ghost Rider and stuff like that.
Not anymore.
Right, I mean, they were. At that time.
Marvel just got Daredevil back, but yeah.
Right, and even though, I mean, arguably, in Avengers, Black Widow, Hawkeye are the kind of vaguely gritty types there, they're assassins or whatever. But yeah, how do you put together a Justice League movie that makes sense to people who have watched Christopher Nolan's Batman that is very grounded, and but then Superman, which is the complete opposite with alien invasion and stuff like that. That's a difficulty. Whereas in Marvel, at least for the lead up to the Avengers, even Captain America was kind of fantastical, relatively speaking. So yeah, that's just a initial hurdle. And if they go about it from we'll just do Justice League and then work from there, which is kind of the opposite of what Marvel has done. I mean, yeah, there's Nolan Batman, but Nolan Batman doesn't have anything to do with what's going to be happening in Justice League, at all.
I think it would have been a huge mistake to try to launch a universe from Nolan's Batman.
It wasn't designed that way.
It wasn't designed. Yeah, and it started in 2005. Those actors are getting older, and they're not going to want to keep playing those.
Oh yeah. Well,
you've got to start with fresher blood.
Yeah. I think one of the things, and this was one of the things to get back to the comic side.
Yes, yeah.
Where the New 52 did launch out of Justice League. That was the first. The first title was Justice League.
Point.
And I think
even that first issue had two characters.
I know. Yeah, it launched deliberate. Yeah, in a way that I don't know if a film. You couldn't use that as a film template.
Yeah, you're right, because we got it week 1, and then the next week we got 20 books or whatever it was. Yeah, sure.
Because I think that is one of the signs where, and Marvel now didn't launch cleanly in the sense that it was couple titles here, a couple titles, which ones became part of the brand, the Marvel Now brand, varied. I mean, it wasn't all at once. It was just whatever the new launches, whatever ones were specifically new launches. Kind
They were
of
putting some of their biggest new launch titles out 5 or 6 months after they started.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And still being, and they didn't necessarily say, oh, all the stuff is going to be at once for these clean starts.
I think a straight up reboot with DC had they really started from scratch. Which is funny because a lot of fans, like huge comic book readers like us, wanted that. Would have been completely fine with that. And I think if they had done that exactly the way they did it, it would probably have been as successful. And I would argue, being less confusing, they probably could have continued making the kind of money they were making.
Yeah.
I think. It would have been a huge risk.
Yeah.
What they did was a risk.
Anything they do is a risk.
Yeah.
I mean, anything radical to grab new readers.
What do you think?
That's what I meant. Like, I said, DC held back.
Yeah, they held back.
It wasn't a clean reboot. I mean, they changed the personalities of some of the characters in positive ways, I think. Aquaman, at least for the first 5 or 6 issues, all that stuff with the Abyss was gripping. It was just gripping and interesting.
But
and
I would argue,
Aquaman.
But I would argue that had nothing to do with 52. Do you know that book was
well, they changed
planned?
his abilities somewhat.
Did they?
That bullshit about having to be in water every hour.
Oh, okay.
That's all gone.
See, the thing is,
That
I don't know Aquaman
whole bit
that well. I didn't know that was even still
talking
in the continuity before up to then. Okay, all right. But I'm just saying that book was announced before 52 was announced. Like, we knew Jeff Johns was doing an Aquaman book, and they announced it too early because we kept waiting around, waiting for it. The same thing happened with Batwoman. As far as I know, they had pages of Batwoman written and maybe even drawn well before 52 started, and then they had to figure out how to make it fit in that universe. And Swamp Thing was the same thing. The whole Brightest Day thing. Brightest Day was just there to lead up to Swamp Thing, and then they did a reboot anyway.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. So I'm just saying that, I'm not sure how much different Aquaman would have been had they never relaunched. You're right, maybe some of the powers and stuff,
well, the timing was good.
I'm pretty sure, but the timing was good. I'm just saying, Jeff Johns had a plan, and I doubt his plan changed all that much because of 52, the way it was so haphazardly thrown together.
Yeah, well, I think especially for something like Aquaman, which has, it's a little bit of a punchline character, but that at the same time, that means it's ripe for a reinterpretation and starting it fresh, saying,
well, they even make a point in that relaunch issue. He is a punchline to the people in the restaurant when he's sitting there, but you realize over the course of the next few issues, he's not a punchline. But then, as the year has gone by, all of the old stuff is creeping back in.
Yeah.
The same bad guys, Black Manta, the whole Atlantean confusion, and they could have just sort of rebooted that character and started clean without all that old continuity, and now they're letting it creep back in, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, but at least
same with Wonder Woman.
People are still
opportunity
buying it though. I think it's cool though that at least Aquaman continues to be one of the higher selling DC titles. He's kind of become a mainstay again. They couldn't, for the longest time, DC could not get an Aquaman book to sell.
Yeah.
And now they've got one that stays in their top 5 or 10 all the time.
Well, I mean, some of that goes back to
Jeff Johns' name.
Well, that's what I'm saying. For me, the fundamental difference really isn't the marketing side. It's creators.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the editor, what the business decision part of it is. That can have impact if implemented poorly by poor creators.
But the problem is editorial has been making way too many crazy demands.
Exactly.
Like they haven't been letting a lot of their writers do not just what they want, but making it clear what what the editorial even wants from them.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I've heard story after story of creators that just throw their hands in the air and go, like they ask me to make these changes, and I make them at the last minute. They send the script back, and I have to change all this other crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, people can't handle it, and that's why people are leaving. Really late
and that
creators
means
that have always gotten along with everybody are just walking away from them because DC's not letting. And that's a big difference between them and Marvel now, where. I mean, like, they let Snyder do whatever he wants to because Snyder was an overnight superstar.
Yeah.
And you have that with some people. Then you go to Marvel now, and you hear story after story of, I wanted to pitch this crazy idea, and Marvel said go for it. And that's what Marvel now's been built on.
Yeah.
You know, and like 3 years ago, never would have seen anybody take Dennis Hopeless's Avengers Arena. What a crazy notion! Let's kill off a character every issue. Like,
and do something, you know.
But they're doing it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and Avengers Arena or the
new Deadpool.
Yeah, or some of the stuff. Actually, Paul Cornell's Wolverine.
Oh, have you been reading that?
Yeah,
I read the first issue and liked it, but didn't keep on with it.
Yeah,
Is it good?
Oh yeah, and he's doing some stuff later on, as well. That's gonna, that he said, usually event activity doesn't happen in Wolverine. Doesn't happen in his solo titles. That usually happens in an X-Men book or something like that.
Yeah.
And they're actually going to do some stuff, do things in the Wolverine book to make that, that a must-read title.
That's kind of exciting.
And that's exciting, and the art's great. But that's, but yeah, I think that's, the creative risks and being able to take advantage of the creators that you have. That's the difference. And
it's unfortunate that keeps happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like they've I want to say they've relaxed a little bit, just in some of the books I've been reading. I mean, Green Arrow is suddenly great.
Well, Green Arrow should be great because it's got a successful TV series on it.
Yeah, no, it should. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, we've got, and by the way, that show's great too.
I haven't watched it, but I've heard.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
I love the show. The show is terrific.
We
I haven't
do
picked
a
up the
regular
comic
podcast on
book
it.
that's
It's great.
based on the TV
I
show.
haven't either, just because we do a podcast on it, and I keep being afraid that if I read that, events that are in that comic will encroach on what I think about the show, and so I'm like, wait, no, that didn't happen in the show, so I can't talk about it. So that's why I haven't read it. But the art looks really good in that book too. We've got
That's one of the things about the Aquaman.
Sorry.
You were talking about the creator,
Yeah.
the writing, and I sort of regret that there's reincorporating some of the old mythos and emphasizing that again. I think it's laziness. I'd rather see it taken in a new direction, and they have that opportunity. But I have to say, Aquaman, it doesn't surprise me that it stayed in the top because it has some of the most stunning artwork in DC superhero line. Just consistently, it's great artwork.
Did anybody else want to bring up anything to add to the discussion or ask any questions? We get about 10 minutes, or maybe 5 if there's for us. Yeah.
I don't know. You were talking yesterday during the movie discussion about the Marvel having a much better grounding in the humanness, if you will, and people able to connect with.
Yeah, that's what they were
their
built on.
characters a lot better than the DC world. And I got to thinking about that over the last 24 hours, and before I came in here today, and I'm thinking, just something as simple as the fact that the Marvel characters, for the most part, are grounded in real places, in a current time period, and all the DC people are in cities that don't exist, in times that are
islands
random.
that don't exist.
Yeah, exactly. And that I think just over the last and I guess in my comic collecting lifetime, it seems like people have just kind of gravitated more toward the Marvel side. Even though I've read Superman and Batman titles fairly religiously in the last 20, 30 years, and Aquaman and Wonder Woman and things like that. It seems like there's more of a connection to the quote, if you can use this term in the comic world, realness in the Marvel world.
I mean, I think I think it's interesting that setting it in real places helps that. I think that it is more about like being character driven than anything, and that's not to say that there aren't plenty of individual DC titles that have managed that, but you're right, Marvel was founded on that principle. And what you had with 52, I've heard a lot of creators say, is that was an attempt to do that with DC.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it succeeded.
No. Well, but I think some of that, is just the creative, is the creative side of it as a whole maybe just not as strong, and some of that maybe even creators getting turned off by editorial, and the business side.
I think it succeeded better with some characters.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the new alien version of Superman, and particularly of Supergirl, have worked very well.
Yeah,
It's
I've liked
redefined those characters. Clark Kent, Superman is still very much an outsider and very much aware of that, but he has a grounding from his being raised on Earth that Kara does not have, and she really is the alien who doesn't fit in, at least so far. I've worried lately that they're going to slip her back into the old Kara to some extent. And that's worked very well with those characters, but other characters it hasn't worked so well with. The thing that's made the changes in Marvel work so well, I think, is that DC has approached this as a reboot, but it's a very conservative reboot.
Yeah.
Marvel has not rebooted. They've evolved. They're the same characters, they've got the old past. Cyclops still has everything that Cyclops ever was, but his experiences have just changed him.
Yeah, Marvel now is all about just a marketing strategy,
Yeah.
and like how they're putting out their books and how they're writing them,
And that they did have
not
major
just
creative
rebooting the whole thing out.
Yeah, and that they did have major creative shifts after a long period of time of people on the same title. I mean, Bendis having as long, Bendis writing more Avengers issues than anyone, and
I would argue they put some people in places they ended up fitting in better.
Oh yeah, well, and sometimes people better after period, and some of this is not just better fitting, but also it is good to have writers move around because it's a fresh viewpoint, a fresh take on the Avengers, and a fresh take on the Fantastic Four, and a fresh take on X-Men.
Would you predict that 52 is eventually, and maybe it won't even take that long, going to just get us kind of back to where we were a couple of years ago?
I'm afraid it will.
Okay.
I really think it will. In the major characters, they didn't reboot Batman. He's still the same as he was, with all that convoluted.
We got four different versions of him, but yeah.
That family, and I think they took Clark Kent, they took Superman. When that first Action comic came out, and he was in jeans and work boots, this seemed just brilliantly daring.
I love that. I thought that was.
I thought Morrison's first 5 or 6 issues were just fantastic.
Yeah, I love those.
And they got him when he throws the politician out the window and barely catches him. That was an interesting change in the character.
Well, and I thought it was really good to take back some of the stuff that was Action. I mean, he would do stuff like that in the original, Action.
And we brought back Mad Scientist Lex Luthor, which was just fantastic. Yeah. I mean, the new characterization of Lex is really good, I think. Where he's like both a mad scientist and a corporate tycoon, kind of, and then like bringing back some of the old stuff that worked if you take out all the silly.
Yeah.
And so
But too soon in the Action title, too soon, there was an old villain. There was Brainiac, and too soon there was the Bottle City of Kandor, and too soon they got him into the regular costume again. And I would have liked to have seen that take much more time.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that it would have been easier to keep some of those new readers if you took more time on that?
I think so. I think you could have done that.
That's precisely what I think.
Because now Action is Superman again.
Yeah.
There's not much difference between the two titles.
Well, I think that's it for
Yeah.
us. I think that's our time. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.